All right. So, big question: Who wins this election, Kamala or Trump? And what's Kamala's path to victory? And if you can steel man, what's Trump's path to victory?
Yeah. So there's not enough information yet. So since I make a lot of predictions on air and then brag about it unbearably, um,
Yeah.
people are always, they'll stop me in the streets and they'll be like, predict this, like predict my marriage. Brother, I don't know anything about your marriage.
Yeah.
How could I possibly predict something without having any information? So in the case of the this campaign, right now I got Kamala Harris at 55% chance of winning. Okay, which is not bad. Doesn't mean she's going to win by 55 because then that would be a 10-point margin. That's not going to happen, right? But I say around 51 to 55. But it's nowhere near over because of a lot of things. One, the Democrats are still seen as more establishment, and people hate the establishment. Two, if war breaks out in the Middle East, which is now unfortunately bordering on likely, right? If that war breaks out, all bets are off.
Do you mean a regional war?
Yeah, like Iran, Israel gets to be a real thing, not just a pinprick and a little bombing here and an assassination there. But no, we're going to war, right? If that happens, then all bets are off and no one has any idea who's going to win. Okay. And if they're pretending that they know, that's ridiculous because it's so unpredictable. And then the third bogey for her is if she goes back to word salads. So there's three phases of Kamala Harris's career. She's not necessarily any different in terms of policy. You can frame it in a bad way. You could frame it in a good way. You could say, oh, she's just seeing which way the wind is blowing. And then, oh, she's a tough cop prosecutor. Oh, and then she's doing justice reform when people want justice reform. Oh, she's a waffler, right? Or you could paint it as she's pretty balanced, right? She prosecuted serious criminals very harshly, but then on marijuana possession, got them into rehab. And you know what? That's actually what you should do, right? So I'm not talking about policy. So there you could have one of those views about Kamala Harris, and I get it. I'm talking about stylistically. So Kamala Harris, until the second debate in the primaries in 2020, is a very competent politician who's in line to be the next Obama, right? She's killing it. District attorney, attorney general, senator. And then the first debate, if you remember, she won. She had that great line about, there was a little girl on that bus that was integrating the schools, and that girl was me. And Biden, being the knucklehead that he is, he's caught on tape going, you're like, don't have that reaction, brother. Okay, because she's criticizing his segregation policy on buses back in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, so she's doing terrific. And then after that debate, until Biden drops out, is a disaster area for Kamala Harris's career. In the primary, she starts falling apart. She can't strategize right. She's for Medicare for all. No, she's not. She's for Medicare for some. What's Medicare for some? I don't know, right? And she goes in the next debate, and Tulsi Gabbard kicks her ass, and then goes in the third debate, gets her ass kicked again, and she's starting to drift away. Then at this point, and this is funny, I have more votes for president than Kamala Harris does.
Nice.
Because Kamala Harris dropped out before Iowa, because that's how much of a disaster her campaign turned into when she was leading. She was leading, right? So then she becomes vice president, and Biden, probably because of that bus line, Jill Biden caught tremendous feelings over that line, okay? So Biden's like, here, have this albatross around your neck. It's called immigration. Good luck. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to change policy, but I'm putting you in charge of it to get your ass handed to you. Okay. And she does. So that's a disaster. And then she starts doing interviews where she's like, we have to become the being, but not the thing we were, and the unbecoming. And you're like, what is going on? Why can neither one of them speak? Right?
Yeah.
And so, but then the third act shocks me. Biden steps down. She grabs all those delegates in a super competent way that we talked about earlier. And then she goes out and gives a speech. I'm like, oh, that speech is good. Mm-hmm. Okay, another one. I'm like, wait a minute. These are good speeches. No more word salads. then she picks Tim Walz and shocks the world. I'm like, that's the correct VP pick.
Yeah.
That is a miracle, right? And then she goes and does the economically populist plan, all those proposals about housing that people care about, grocery prices that people care about. Real or not real, that is correct political strategy. So this Kamala Harris is back to the original Kamala Harris, who was a very competent, skilled politician.
And as I was telling you offline, she's doing whoever's doing her TikTok is like blowing up, and they're doing risky, edgy stuff.
Yes.
I did not expect that from somebody that kind of comes from the Biden camp of just like be safe, be boring, all this kind of stuff.
So you have to give Kamala Harris ultimate credit because she's the leader of the campaign and she makes the final decisions. But there's apparently a couple of people inside that campaign that are ass kickers, and they have convinced her to take risk, which Democrats never take. And it is correct to take risks. You cannot get to victory without risk. So the vice president pick is the bellwether. When Hillary Clinton picked Tim Kaine, I said, that's it, she's going to lose. Because Tim Kaine is playing prevent defense. He's wallpaper. I mean, he'd be lucky to be wallpaper. He's just a white wall, right? It's just, and when he speaks, it's white noise. He never says anything interesting. He's the most boring pick of all time. That's saying we already won, haha. Okay. If Kamala Harris had picked Mark Kelly, that's the Tim Kaine equivalent. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, he's an astronaut. I don't give a shit that he's an astronaut. What is he saying? Is he a good politician? Does he have good policies? Is he exciting on the campaign trail? Is he going to add to your momentum? Mark Kelly, he might be a good guy, but number one, he's a very corporate Democrat. And number two, it's like watching grass grow. He's terrible at speaking, if you ask me, right? So I thought for sure she's going to pick Mark Kelly, right? Because that's what a normal Democrat does. Or if they want to go wild and crazy, they'll go to Bashir. So I was like, please let it be Shapiro, because he's at least not bad. Yeah. He's done some populist things, and he's strategic. He's really smart. I need smart candidates. Dumb candidates don't help. They don't have a mind of their own. They can't take risks. They're not independent thinkers. They're going to lose. So she picks the smartest, most populist candidate. Boom, boom, we got a winner. That's a good campaign.
Speaking of risks, when they debate, when Kamala and Trump debate, what do you think that's going to look like? Who do you think is going to win?
Oh, that's not close. Kamala Harris will win. Yeah, unless she falls apart, unless she goes back to the bad era, right? That's risk number 3.
Well, hold on a second. I guess in a debate you can have pre-written. It seems like when she's going off the top of her head is when the word salad sometimes comes out. Sometimes.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see, right? We'll have to see because she hasn't done any tough interviews. She hasn't really been challenged. So I hope to God that doesn't happen.
That she doesn't fall apart, you mean?
Yeah.
Because I hope she does a bunch of interviews, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm this is going to sound really funny. I'm too honest, but I am like in the context of Kamala Harris probably shouldn't come on the Young Turks. We do a really tough interview and it would hurt her. Okay.
Do you though? Like it's tough, but like you're pretty respectful. Maybe I just have my sort of like I'm okay with a little bit of tension. You're pretty respectful. Even when you're yelling, there's like respect. Like you don't do like a gotcha type thing. Mm-hmm. There's certain things you could do, like you said this in the past. You can say a line from the past that's out of context. It forces the other person to have to define the context. You just, sort of debate type tactics over and over. Like you don't seem to do that. You just like ask them questions genuinely, and then you argue the point, and then you also like hear what they say. The only thing I've seen you do sometimes tough that you sometimes like interrupt, like you speak over the person if they are trying to do the same.
Right. Which only if they're filibustering.
Yeah, if they're filibustering. But like that's a tricky one. That's it's a tricky one.
No, but Lex, the problem for her coming on our show isn't that we would be unfair to her. It's that we would be fair. So we would ask questions she is going to have trouble answering.
Oh, the corporate stuff.
Right. I mean, like, so Biden said he was going to take the corporate tax rate to 28%, and he barely tried. You say you're going to take it to 28%. Why should we trust you? Right. You guys said $15 minimum wage, and then you took it out of the bill. Why should we trust you? Right. Those are very tough questions. She's never going to get that in mainstream media. Mainstream media is going to have faux toughness, but in reality, they're going to be softballs, right? And so the debates, you're right, Lex, is a little bit easier because Sarah Palin proved that you could just memorize scripted talking points. And she admitted it later. She's like, she was super nervous. She memorized the talking points, and no matter what they asked, she just gave the talking point, which, by the way, people barely noticed because that's what all politicians do. Okay, she just admitted it. And so, no, Trump's a disaster in a debate. He's a one-man wrecking crew of his own campaign. So any competent debater would eviscerate Donald Trump. I mean, they just, on any given topic, when he says something like, here, let's take one lunatic conspiracy theory that he just had recently. And by the way, if you're a right winger and you keep getting hurt every time I say he's a lunatic or I insult Donald Trump, don't, like, you sound like a left winger. I'm offended. I'm offended. I'm offended. Get over it. Get over it. Okay. So we have disagreements. Hear what the other side is saying. And by the way, I say the same thing to the left. Okay. I say, you think everybody on the right's evil? You're crazy. No, they just have a different way of looking at the world, which, by the way, is an interesting conversation. We should talk about that in a minute too. But so I do it to both sides. But okay, but Trump says, oh, I don't think there's anyone at Kamala Harris's rallies. It's all the pictures are AI. Okay, so let's say he says that in a debate because he's liable to say anything, right? You just say, okay, so you think every reporter that was there, every photographer that was there, every human being that was there, they're all lying. They have a conspiracy of thousands of people, but none of them were actually there. Do you understand how insane you sound?
So this is a good place to, can you steelman the case for Trump?
Yeah. Yeah. So Trump is a massive risk because of all the things we talked about earlier. But there is a percentage chance that he's such a wild card that he overturns the whole system. And that is why the establishment is a little scared of him. So if he's in office, here, I'll give you a case of Donald Trump doing something right. Something wrong first and then something right. So he bombs Soleimani, the top general of Iran, and kills him. That risks World War III. That risks a giant war with Iran that devolves. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. If you're anti-war, you should have hated that he assassinated Soleimani. But after the assassination, Iran doesn't want to get into it, even though they're in a rage, and they do a small bombing. You can tell if it's a small or a big one, right? So that's them saying, we don't really want war, but for our domestic crowd, we have to bomb you back, right? And that's when the military-industrial complex comes to Trump and says, no, you have to show them who's tough and bomb this area. And Trump says, no, they did a small bombing, not a large bombing. I don't want the war. I'm not going to do that bombing. That was this shining moment.
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest steelman for Trump is that he has both the skill and the predisposition to not be a warmonger. He, I think, better than the other candidates I've seen, is able to end wars and end them. Now, you might disagree with it, but in a way where there's legitimately effective negotiation that happens. Like, I just don't see any other candidate currently being able to sit down with Zelensky and Putin and to negotiate a peace treaty that both are equally unhappy with.
So, on the one hand, almost all other politicians are going to be controlled by the military-industrial complex, and that complex wants to bleed Russia dry, and that's what the Ukraine war is doing. It's a double win for the defense contractors. Number one, every dollar we send to Ukraine is actually not going to Ukraine. It's going to U.S. defense contractors, and then they are sending old weapons to Ukraine. The money is to build new weapons for us. So a lot of people don't know that. So the defense contractors want that war to go on forever, and they're an enormous influence in Washington. The second win is they're depleting Russia. And Russia's gotten themselves into a quagmire like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're bleeding out. So the military-industrial complex wants Russia to bleed out for as long as humanly possible. They actually care more about their own interests, of course, than they do about Ukrainian interests. So, in fact, there's a good argument to be made that Ukraine could have gotten a peace deal earlier, and we prevented it. So, but the bottom line now is probably how a deal gets done is they let go of 3 more areas in Ukraine. They already lost Crimea. They'd have to let go of 3 more regions. And that is tough because at that point, Russia's a little bit encouraged. Every time they do an invasion, they get more land. They might not get all the land they wanted, but they get a lot of land. So it's a very difficult issue.
But literally, which person, if they become president, will end the war?
Trump will end that war because Trump will go in and he loves Russia and Putin anyway.
I just disagree with he loves Russia, the implication of that, meaning he will do whatever Putin tells him. I think
he'll do 90% of what Putin tells him.
I just disagree with that. I think he wants to be the kind of person that says "fuck you" to Putin, while patting him on the back and being, but out negotiating Putin.
So I don't like talking about Russia because there's so much emotions that go into that topic. Yeah. The right wing, the minute you mention Russia, they're like, "Oh, it's a hoax," and all this baggage that comes with it, etc. To me, Russia's not any different than Saudi Arabia or Israel for Trump. You give me money, I like you. You buy my apartments, I like you, right? If you don't give me money, I don't like you. It's not that complicated. So, okay, don't worry about the Russia part of it. Like, the bottom line is Trump thinks, what do I care about those 3 regions of Ukraine? I want to get this thing done, right? So he'll go and he'll say, Ukraine, we're going to withdraw all help unless you agree to a peace deal with Russia. And Russia wants those 3 regions. That's the peace deal. That's it. So Ukraine will lose a part of their country and we'll get to a peace deal.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope not. I think Trump sees themselves and wants to be a great negotiator. So, and I personally want the death of people to end, and I think Trump would bring that much faster. And I disagree with you. At least my hope is that he would negotiate something that would be fair.
He's not. His anti-war record is so complicated because moving the embassy in Israel and killing the top Iranian general were super provocative, and they could have easily triggered a giant war there. And then you know what's going to happen if you get into any kind of real war. Trump's going to want to prove his buttons larger. So then he's going to do massive, ridiculous bombings. I mean, I worry about nukes. And so we had Giuliani on the show on the RNC, and I asked him this question. I said, he keeps saying, oh, they wouldn't do it if I was in charge. I'm like, what does that mean? Because it sounds like what it means is they wouldn't do it because they know if they did it, I would do something insane, like attack Russia or use nukes. And Rudy said, yeah, that's what it means. So that means you have to at least bluff that, and you have to get them to believe that he's a madman. That's the madman theory of Nixon. And Nixon and Rudy said that too. He was very clear about it. But the problem is, if you get your bluff called, and so if you actually attack Russia, you're going to start World War III. So that's why, yeah, if you could just get away with bluffing, maybe. But he's playing a very dangerous game, and he massively increased drone strikes. On the other hand, he didn't bomb Iran further, and on the other hand, he started the process of withdrawal from Afghanistan. So not black and white, complicated record. And one thing, I'll give him another piece of credit here. I think I'm taking this steel manning too far. But here's the credit was that he changed the rhetoric of the right wing. They went from the party of Dick Cheney, war is great, and all Muslims are evil. And so he hates Muslims too, but that's a different thing, right? But we have to attack the enemy, we have to start wars, etc. To now Republican voters are generally anti-war and hate Dick Cheney. Oh, I'll take it. So that's a great thing that Trump did, even if he didn't mean it. even if he does these provocative things that could lead to a much worse war, even if I'm worried that he'll be so reckless he'll start a bigger war, at least he did that right. And so I'm happy to have our right-wing brothers and sisters join us in the anti-war movement. And I'm not being a jerk about it. Like, I love it. And so this is another thing the left does wrong from time to time, which is if you agree with a right-winger 2%, they'll be like, oh, welcome in. Come on, vote for Trump. Come on in. Yeah, woohoo, water's warm, right? If you if you disagree with the left 2%, they're like, that's it, you're banished and you're a Nazi. Well, brother, how are we going to win an election if you're banishing everybody there is, right? So hold up. These Republican voters are coming at your anti-war position. Take the win. No, they're MAGA and I won't deal with them. Even when they agree with you, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Take the win, right? So when Charlie Kirk says yes to paid family leave, when Patrick Bet-David on his program says yes, roughly says yes to paid family leave, take the win.